Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very good, as
Yeah.
noticed by my high pitch.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Always energetic.
I'm so happy to reconnect. Yeah,
Me
after 20
too.
years. Yeah,
20 years is a long time. For me, that's that's too long to be honest.
yeah, it's
But you know
50%
what? I feel, but
of our
imagine like in 20 years, that connection is still like it's almost like not a lot has changed. Like you can still talk to each other where it doesn't feel like it's bristly in any way. It just feels natural.
Yeah, I still
Yeah.
remember you in like lit class
Imagine.
and discussing like the Tempest.
The temp. Oh my god.
I
Writing those
still do.
papers?
I still do Shakespeare classes.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm
But you loved that.
yeah. I love drama. I, I am there. No one does drama like Shakespeare. Like,
No, no one, definitely not. No,
yeah.
absolutely not.
The Kardashians got nothing on Shakespeare, so yeah.
No, but those were like such formative memories for me because I feel like being in school together, being in IB, the way that we were, just that closeness to say that you
Yeah,
knew people at that depth.
yeah,
Now it doesn't seem to exist at that same level. Like it's almost like you have to forge friendships and try to get them to that point.
yeah. Because you're not
Um,
in a class in a room together for 8 hours or 9 hours, whatever
no,
it was, a day
no.
with anyone.
Literally.
Yeah,
And then you're also like every weekend with each other too, which was even more hilarious. It was like we did not get enough time during the week. We needed the weekends too to kind of like supplement.
of course. To talk about the drama that happened during the week.
My favorite, my favorite. But thank you so much for doing this, Ritu. I feel like I've been following your journey for some time with the data doc and everything else that you've been doing online. And I think one of the things that got me to reach out to you is that I was really, really impressed by a lot of what you've been up to. I think there is a lot of truth that you're speaking, which I'm a big person that just gravitates to people that just say it like it is.
Yeah,
And I loved that. And I love that candid nature of a lot of your reels. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about that and kind of share some of your wisdom with everyone, which I think you have a lot of wisdom
I'm
to
not
share.
sure about the wisdom, but I do have a lot of unfiltered views. So
No, it's good. I honestly like whenever I'd watch a reel, I was like, thank you for saying it. And somebody, I've worked with certain companies that I like where a lot of this just needs to be said right up front.
yeah,
But people are too afraid to say it, right? Like I think people hesitate because they're like, oh, like does this mean our engagement is over? Does this mean this is going to end? No, it doesn't. I feel like people need to hear the truth, and I think you were actually giving them a lot of that direct
yeah.
feedback. So
It's not
that
always
was really key.
comfortable, but
No,
yeah, then it's very simple. I think in the
mm,
first meeting, people know whether they can work with me
yeah,
and the Dataduck team or not.
yeah,
And that's fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But I know you so well, Ritu. But tell my audience who you are, what the Data Duck is, and what you've been up to, and how you built the Data
Sure. Um, little bit cuckoo
Duck.
in
Okay.
who I think I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this has really changed in the last, like, I think 3 to 4 years. I lost I lost a child,
Mm-hmm.
and after I lost him, I was like completely distraught, and I think I've rebuilt myself in a completely different way since
Yeah.
that like major breakdown,
Of course.
wherein now I just think I am energy, and I
Yeah.
think you're energy, and I think that everyone is part of this universal energy. And so when I see you, I see me, and when
Mm.
you see me, I hope you see you. And
Oh, for sure.
all I'm doing is reflecting you uh,
Mm.
during this interaction. So
Yeah.
who I am is actually very fluid. It's whatever you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is who I am, and I try not to let things stick. Like I tried to do first principles on most things.
Yeah.
I do have some biases, yeah, but I'm really trying to rewire my brain to sort of start from scratch
Hmm.
with everything and everyone, and also be super open to whatever and treating life like a video game where I just need to
Yes.
level up. Um, and the bigger the baddie that I'm fighting,
Yeah.
once I win, the better the weapon I get. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel like that's really, really insightful and actually like very, very true to who you should be. I think, and who we should be, in a lot of ways. I think that you are giving a lot of that energy back. I feel a lot of the times, and I think that that's what I gravitated towards. Right, like that's kind of why I felt like even watching a reel, I was like, no, this is it. Like this is what I need. I need this in my life. Right,
Oh,
and I think that that's really great. I feel like it shows. It 100% shows.
yeah.
And I feel like even your journey with the data duck has been so compelling in its own way. Have you actually brought a lot of this to how you formed the data duck and how the
Yeah.
data duck works today?
Yes. So my chief of staff always, my chief of staff and our finance person,
Yeah,
um, like our commercial person,
yeah,
um, laughs at me like all the time, and I'm not allowed to take certain decisions because,
right.
like, even though I studied actuarial science and I'm
Yeah,
like supposedly using data for everything, I don't use it at the data duck. In the
yeah,
sense, of course, we use it in our work, but not. So, for example,
yeah,
someone needed to move to Germany because her partner was moving to Germany,
yeah,
and I didn't want her to leave. So I'm like, let's just open up Dataduck Germany, right?
yeah.
This is pre COVID when working remotely wasn't really a thing, you know?
Mm,
So we started in Melbourne, and then I fell in love with a man that lives in Mumbai. So I'm like,
yeah.
let's just open up Dataduck Mumbai. so, so and then we opened up like in Austin.
Yeah.
And so all of this has just been really like, oh, I like you. I want you to work for me. Let's open an
Mm,
office, right? So a lot of stuff has been very serendipitous, um and like I didn't realize how bad I was at like not using my like I'm just using my gut on everything.
yeah.
That we had like a round table, and someone was like, oh, what was your interview like at the Data Duck? And I was like, oh, who took your interview? And she's like, you did. I'm like, I did? No memory, right? Um, to be fair, we're a mid-sized team, so I don't remember every single interview.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm like, okay, what did I ask you? She's like, oh, you asked me what I like. I'm
Hmm.
like, that's the first question. She's like, yeah, you
Hmm.
literally was like, hey, what do you like? And I said, I'm a foodie, and you're like, you're hired. I was like, really?
Yeah.
That She's like, that was the interview. I'm like, oh my God, like you're a
Yeah.
developer. Like I should have probably like tested your skills, sent you to our
Yeah.
head lead dev. Like
Yeah.
there needs to be processes around me.
Yeah. No, but that's impressive, Ritu, because I feel like you are going with emotion, right? You're leading with emotion. You're leading with a feel. That's everything.
I don't know. Like I just and
Yeah.
she's been a really great developer. So I'm not
There you
like luckily otherwise it would have been like a case study for how not to run a company.
go.
But yeah, I think I've been lucky. There have been a few mistakes,
Yeah.
for sure, but I think if I was very scientific about hiring, those mistakes would still be there. So
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe because I don't have any business partners and I own this completely, um I do take some decisions on a whim or on
Yeah.
what seems like a whim, but I feel like it's an energy. Yeah.
No, but I think that that is, at least for me, from my experience, that is the right way to sort of build teams, right? Like, I think that one of the
Yeah.
key things when you are building out a team really is it has to feel like there is a feeling. There is a feeling that motivates everyone to want to be there. But I
Yeah.
also think people will give you their best when they feel like they're gravitating towards your energy, right? And I think that as a leader, like that is what it is. If they can resonate to that vibration, they will produce their best for you. I also
Yeah.
think people are people at the end of the day, and it doesn't matter how good you are technically at something. emotion, feeling is really our biggest driver.
Of
So being in a
course.
space where you feel that way,
Yeah.
where you feel seen and you feel received in the way that you are, that's everything. So I think, her saying to you that that was, like an easy and quick interview, and then, now being a really good developer for you, like those things do translate, right?
Yeah.
People
I
feel that
they
way.
do most of the time. And
Yeah.
I think that um one of the things that I remember is that when I started my career off with national security,
Yeah.
and when I looked around the room, like there was a few of us, and they were kind of shedding people quite fast in terms of whom they'll take forward.
Mm.
And I'm like, there's no way I'm making it. There was like people who were super athletic, like, just like, I don't know. It was insane. There was one guy who had a completely photographic memory, and I'm like, this is great
Mm.
for like intelligence because you just
Yeah.
remember everything, and you don't have to write anything where like someone
Right.
will find the paper.
Right.
So I'm like, these guys are in. Like, what am I doing here? And they picked me and a bunch of other people
Yeah.
just because we were super resilient, and we loved each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and just knowing that someone has your back 24/7
Yeah.
makes you do things that you can't do if you don't have that sort of team around you. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I learned very fast that it's not necessarily about what you've done, but it's about what you can do when you have
Right.
that sort of setting. So, and I
Yeah.
think that, I mean, when I see your creative work, I feel
Mm.
like you bring the same to the table.
It is like I think for me, feeling is everything. I won't do it. I won't do anything if I doesn't if I don't feel right about it.
Yeah.
Whether that's like anything that's creative, even in my day job, like working where I do work. Like I would never take a job if I did not feel right about the job.
Yeah.
Like feeling is it's so pivotal, and that's why when you said it, I was like, yeah, no, I get this 100%, right? Like I've been in interviews or I've talked to companies where I just feel like the energy is so off for me that I just know in my heart of hearts that even if I did work here, I'd become destructive almost immediately
Yeah.
because I'm just feeling either attacked or I'm just feeling like this is just toxic and wrong
Yeah.
for me. And I've walked out of companies. I had a job that I literally started and I knew within 3 weeks I did not want to be there, and I
Yeah.
literally walked out and I was just like, I'm not doing any of this, right?
So
And the same
this
thing
is
applies to
amazing
creativity. Yeah.
because you've been, following your gut. It takes um, a lot of courage. Like,
Yeah.
I have stuck it out in places and relationships as well.
Hmm.
Where I'm like, no, 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 mind, like this is totally fine, he ticks all the boxes or whatever, but then it didn't work out or something went wrong. And I think
Yeah.
that, you know I think that intuition is something that all of us have been trained out of, when
Yeah.
trying to create like minions who just do the work that needs to be
Yep.
done. So I think the world is sort of, the more people I meet, the more people are leaning into their intuition and leaning into that sort of level of analysis and not thinking it's
Yeah.
cuckoo anymore.
No, it really isn't. And I genuinely think, especially as a business owner or
Yeah.
doing anything where you are creating for yourself and it is to your tune, like the key thing is to really, follow up on that gut. Like there's nothing else. The decision making will come from there. And I
Yeah.
think you will know. And I think that's one of the key things. Like I talk to a lot of people who have never done a business or never started something, and I'm like, no, the one thing you need to do to yourself as a favor is start something, right? Like start something, do it, because you will learn right away
Oh,
that listening to that internal voice is so pivotal to everything, that even if it doesn't succeed, even if nothing comes out of it and you leave it, you will have such a key tool within your workflow that you'll easily be able to go out and do anything, and anything will feel right away, and you'll be successful at it because it feels right for you, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of also learning on the job. Like, there's so many
Huge.
things, like, the way that, if I may, The
Yeah.
way the Datadog has sort of grown over time, we started
Yeah.
with UX before UX was coined, right? And we were just designing interfaces
Yeah.
to make them easier to use, and it started with my deep hatred for the MATLAB interface in 2000, and two, where
Yeah.
I'm just like, what is this? Like this is why is it so hard, right?
Yeah.
Like at a base, and I'm like, I can do this manually faster than I can using this program. And I
Right.
like, and so with a lot of like hate, I was like, I'm just going to change this
Mm.
design and create a plugin. And so that's how all of this started.
Yeah.
It started from impatience, and I think a lot of solutions start from uh,
Impatience.
impatience, right? So like someone had to get somewhere fast to build a wheel, or do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Absolutely.
there was some
Absolutely.
impatience there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we started that, and then we were doing for a very long time we were doing UI UX, um, and a lot of data analytics in order to be able to build the right sort of products out,
Yeah.
um, and we did some like core data work as well. But most of it was, or the fun ones were the ones that
Mm.
led to like a UI, like a design or a product.
Yeah.
Um, and then we were working with this one company, and it was like this is like one of the first like e-commerce platforms that really did well, at
Right.
scale. And we were designing that, and the marketing team was not able to get the kind of sales that, or the CAC was too high, and they just weren't able to get enough. And I'm like,
Hmm.
you're bringing the wrong people to my product, right? Well,
Yeah.
it's their product, but
But
I
yeah.
felt I'm very invested in my work. So I'm
Of
like, you're
course.
bringing the wrong people to my product. And they're like,
Right.
it's my product, not
Right.
yours. But that's not true, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, fine. Give me your
Mm.
digital marketing
Mm.
and let me do this.
Mm.
Now, this big company, there's no way they're going to give me the digital marketing, right? So I
Right.
went to one of the smaller players that were just starting, and I'm like, I will do your UI UX for free if you allow me to do your marketing for free. And he's like,
Hmm.
what's the catch? Like,
Catch.
he's like what? This is too good to be true, right? And I'm like, no, I just need to learn
Yeah.
digital marketing because I need
Yeah.
to understand this so I can go poke holes in some other person's digital marketing. They're like, this guy was like, you seem like an evil person. Like you're doing this to win a war of words with
I
somebody.
mean, yeah.
I'm like,
Yes.
of course. Like,
Yeah.
why
Absolutely.
else would you
Yeah.
do anything?
I agree.
so, so we did this for this tiny, like, I
Hmm.
mean, comparatively tiny brand.
Right.
And we were killing it with digital marketing. Like,
Hmm.
so then when we went back to the big brand, instead of
Hmm.
it being a problem where my UI UX was apparently not up to mark to get
Right.
people to pay for this, we took over the digital marketing in a sense
Hmm.
that we told them do this, do this, do this. And the conversion started like it was like 3x,
Right.
right? So basically I did not bring um like people who eat kosher food to a pig farm,
Hmm.
right? Like
Hmm.
I just brought the right people, you know?
Correct.
I brought a
Correct.
bunch of Germans who are enthusiastic about bratwurst to the pig farm, right? Like
Yeah.
it was that sort of situation. and
Yeah.
and then with targeting, we got like I didn't realize how much data went into this, right? And so we started really enjoying the targeting game.
Hmm.
And then we realized that SEO wasn't working. And so then they were like, oh, the copy on your website is wrong.
Hmm.
And I'm like, mm,
Hmm.
let me run this SEO campaign for free.
Yeah.
So we now do everything, including store
Yeah.
design,
Yeah.
because I was sending people into the store and I didn't feel like the store was creating the magic that we'd created in the brand and in the
Hmm.
online experience. So it's not that I always get it right.
Yeah.
It's just that I we do everything from first principles, and then we tie in the experience together, right?
Correct.
So what happens is that people feel calm because they're getting the same experience the whole way through.
Yeah.
It's not like this, what, are you sure this is this store? It didn't seem like this online, like,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, I think the data doc is effectively expanded because I want an A+ on every project.
Yeah. I
So
mean, that was always you at school anyway,
yeah, so I'm
right?
a bit obsessed
But
with that. So
yeah,
I'm yeah, so basically that's how we have grown.
to
It
this.
seems crazy that
Hmm.
my inability to give, like, to say our work wasn't that good, and yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes we are wrong, like
Yeah.
we're not optimal, and we'll work on that. But a lot of the times I think there's a chain,
Hmm.
and there needs to be someone who's conducting the change,
Absolutely.
not
But I think
like
that
this silo thing.
no, silos are literally the downfall of every company. But I think that one of the key things that I think that I've taken away from what you've said here, but what I also saw a lot, in your work, is that iterating is not something that you're afraid of. Experimenting is not something that you're afraid of. Having that ability to say that, things can break down and should break down because that's where the learnings come through. I think it's something that a lot of people, have a really hard time reconciling, right? So your ability to even go into a company and make them okay with the fact that you're going to experiment with something by offering them something for free is really, really, it's really powerful because I think companies need to see that, right?
Yeah.
And no one understands a journey as well as they think they do. Like I think companies have very good internal voice where they're like, we know our user journey so well, and you're like, no, you actually don't because no one went outside and actually took 5 minutes of their time to talk to someone who maybe is in a store or who actually uses your product, right?
Yeah.
So your iterative approach is really, really key because I think that once companies realize things should break and reform continuously, they will immediately understand the value of the growth that they could potentially be getting out of this journey, where they can actually like really get a leg up on the industry. So those things are really key. I think that you're teaching them some very powerful stuff there.
But Al Cream, like, I think it takes a lot of guts on the other side of the table to do this as
Yeah,
well. Do you
yeah,
know, like,
yeah,
there's some companies that we know we get in with low risk projects, and then over time, like, we've had clients for like 18 years,
yeah.
so even the clients who are with us for like say 2 years, we
Hmm.
might have gone in with a super low risk,
Yeah,
project, and then as they get comfortable with us, we get comfortable with them, we start pushing what we can do together.
hmm,
And so I think that there's a lot of like tangoing that happens.
yeah,
And I really have to appreciate the people on the other side of the table who are willing to put their money
yeah,
and their
yeah.
reputation, because I'm from outside, right? Like, if this crashes, I bounce. you
Yeah,
know,
you're out. You're done.
I'm out.
Yeah, yeah.
And I might have a blip in my reputation, but it's not big enough because we've
Hmm.
done this so many times well.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it takes two, and I think, I don't know, what do you feel like? Do you feel that, like, you yourself seek
Yeah.
people who themselves are comfortable with, like, I'm very comfortable with instability. Like,
Hmm.
instability makes me feel alive.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think like I personally feel like you have to be okay with being not okay, at
Yeah.
least for a period of time, right? Like I think in anything, I don't see growth when you are not, when you're everything is just the same. And dynamic is so key because dynamic really shifts how you think, how you adapt, what you're going to be doing next, right? And it forces you to innovate. Like it really forces you to think really outside the box. And I think that
Yeah.
that is hyper pivotal, and it's something that I take true. It's true to my core, even in my day to day, right? Like anything that I'm going to be doing, if I'm not feeling challenged by it, that really, is always a marker for me to reevaluate it and think to myself, why isn't it challenging me? Sometimes
Yeah.
maybe to my detriment, maybe in the sake of like a relationship where maybe there should be an element of stability there.
Yeah.
But on the whole, that's what it is. And so for companies, like even when I do work for companies or work with companies, that's something that I look for. But I don't also, find it's something that I want them to learn. Like I don't want them to come in and think to themselves, you're not going to be okay with not being okay. Like you have to be okay with that. right?
Yeah.
And I think as a designer and working in product, like that's one of the key things for us that brings a lot of the joy is the fact that like if a company is okay to say that you can continuously just reevaluate and experience, that's great because it means that you are building something, iteratively more powerful each time.
Yeah.
But it's also something that actually respect the dynamic of the world because the world is changing, things
I
are
love that.
changing,
Yeah.
right?
I love that because
So
one of the things that I've noticed is, um, people were really uncomfortable with sharing things online
yeah,
at some point,
yeah,
and the needle just shifted. I
yeah,
mean, there was the explosion of the creator economy, and then there's, us using AI to such a large extent that,
yeah.
the other day I put into Chat GPT roast me, and it was hilarious. Like it was so good, I mean, I'm not popular enough for someone to roast me, right? So I created it through chat. But um, I have a question for you. So when you
Ask me.
moved, like you were
Hmm.
effectively, both of us, we were plucked out of
Yeah,
Kenya and
yeah,
plonked in another country,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
For me, I don't think I knew who I was
yeah.
until I left.
100%.
Was that you?
Yeah. You can't like. It's almost like you've been in my brain for the last month and a half. But I've actually been grappling with that exact thought, right? Because I think what happened is when we left, you really began to form. And I think being in a space where you legitimately don't know anything, you don't know anyone, and you are literally starting out from zero, it was very daunting. And I think when you're younger, it is very daunting, right?
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, I've been wanting that feeling more and more.
Yeah.
And lately, I've been thinking the same thing. I'm like, do I actually need to move somewhere else and actually force myself back into this unknown to really find my next phase, right? Because I think
Oh,
that is really what is becoming more and more apparent to me. Is like things seem a little too easy sometimes, and maybe it's now time to change them because I personally I get bored very fast
mm,
if things are just routine, right? And when we were younger, I think that that's what we thrived on because we were obviously still forming. But when we left the house, the excitement of life came from that struggle. And I think that struggle has to kind of exist to a certain extent, on a daily basis, because
yeah.
otherwise the dynamic of life kind of stagnates, and then you're just like, no, this is it's a little creepy, to be honest.
Yeah.
So no, it's literally 100% true. But have you
Very,
found
yeah.
that it's something that you've been trying to be doing more of?
I think it's just happened to me because
Yeah,
I've been really lucky to be constantly working, like since I was about like, oh my god, I forgot to stop Slack, but I will
that's okay. No
now.
worries.
So I've always been in a geographically new space. So my
Yeah,
first, I mean, post university,
yeah,
um, first gig through Dataduck was working on national security,
right.
um, and in policing actually.
Hmm.
And I found myself in like the Northern Territories of Australia, which is a totally different culture. It's
Right.
mostly the indigenous culture that we were looking into, and it was like being in a whole different country, right? Then after that, I had a China, like I had a Middle East, like sort of Waziristan, Afghanistan experience, and then
Yeah,
after that, I was in China, right? So I was always in places where I didn't speak the language. I didn't
yeah,
particularly enjoy the food. So, like I grew up thinking I loved Chinese, and now I know what to order,
yeah,
but it was these the things that you bond on, which is conversation and
yeah,
food, was
yeah.
kind of not there for me, right?
Right.
So, and I was often there alone, like not with a group that was like me. So that like today, if you say go and start up in Venezuela, I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it just doesn't phase me that I don't know anyone
Mm.
there. I don't speak the language and I have no idea
Hmm.
about anything, right?
Yeah,
And I think that one of the things that this has done is it's tuned that sense of intuition and sense of on the go problem solving even
Hmm.
more, because when you're um like when your life depends on that, then
Yeah,
you really tune into it, you know.
absolutely.
um like both during times of war, which was very very like you're making like decisions like this, you know.
Quickly.
And then also when you're navigating the business environment of China, like I was very very aware of, like, they didn't really need to hire me, right?
Hmm.
Because I wasn't Chinese.
Yeah,
I didn't know the culture well,
yeah.
but I am helping brands with their China strategy. Like that just seemed, it kind of seemed wrong in a way to me,
Hmm.
but I'm like, okay, let's do this. And of course, like took a lot of help from the local culture, but I think that being that filter sort of helped because
Hmm.
I didn't make the Western brands that were trying to enter China lose that
Yeah,
key aspect of themselves, but also managed to get a Chinese element in. And I did the same with India,
yeah.
right? And now, like, I just know India. Like, we've worked with farmers, we've worked
Hmm.
with like sex workers in India, we've worked with the billionaires of India.
Hmm.
So we've done north, south, east, west. Like, we've done India so deeply that there is a tribal knowledge in my organization now when
Yeah.
it comes to, like, I know whom to pick when, if someone says we're going to be selling um, track pants, right? That cost $3
Yeah.
to women who have never worn pants before, but they want to
Right.
start doing sport, at
Hmm.
school. I know whom to pick from my team for that.
Yeah.
So it's been super fun to have that.
Yeah, but I think to your point, like you've through that experience of experiencing that much dynamic in your life and that much change in your life, right? Adapting even now, even when you look at your company, seems very seamless to you because you actually have this ability to say that we are not doing the one thing. We have the ability to actually shift ourselves into different contexts really easily. It's key for us to play up on our strengths in those contexts, right? And I think that now that you know your team, that you actually were able to pick and build, right? It's easy to even go with your team and say, okay, you actually now have the support to face the dynamic, right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Um, yeah, it's great. And I think that like that is really also what has given you kind of that leeway to actually say to yourselves, we can continuously challenge ourselves, right? Like
Yeah.
you've continuously given yourselves challenges just by moving into these different spaces and saying, we're here, we're doing this, and it's completely different and devoid of everything we did in the past, but we're going to learn, we're going to
I
grow.
think also, Kareem, it's because we're a service company.
Yeah,
If we were a product agency, we
yeah.
could not pivot this much. Do you know
No,
what I mean?
no, no, no,
There's no way.
no.
So I think that the place that we find ourselves in is that we're solving like 100 problems at any given time, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
And so the breadth of experience at different levels really
yeah,
helps,
yeah.
you know?
It really does.
And it's such a privilege to work on other people's problems in that sense, because you learn
Yeah,
so much.
yeah.
I'm keen to know from you, because
Mm,
you've been an entrepreneur in companies,
mm,
right? Within, and driving change from within, and I think
mhm.
that's actually much harder.
Yeah.
So I would love to like hear about
Mm.
how you navigate that.
Yeah, I think you know what one of the key challenges when you're doing it from that perspective really is the fact that at the end of the day you sometimes are an employee there, and so being opinionated and coming in with strong opinions is always not necessarily met with the same weight. I think when I worked for a consultancy before, it was a little bit easier to come in and actually give opinions because you have the backing of a team that is external that you've chosen to bring this team into to your institution, and there at that point there's a little bit of a power dynamic that exists where you're coming in and you're like authoritarian about what it is that they should be doing, right? When you exist within the organization is a little bit different because they're not looking at you in the same way, and you have to really be really good at winning and being really good at what it is you do and demonstrating those things, in order to try to build up that authority, right? Like you have to be really continuous. You have to almost be like a showman. And it really takes me back to things like, like a sports day or whatever. Like you continuously have to be that athlete that everyone is seeing, that is continuously like successful, and that people will want on their team. And that I think is really, it's really key. But I also feel like, it's what's driven a lot of desire. The only reason that I've actually done this as frequently as I've done it is to do what you've been able to do with your agency, whereby you've been going into different spaces. Like I've wanted to continuously feel like I'm not a master of one thing. It's a master of everything, right? Like I want to go in, I want to learn from every single company. I want every different context. If it's a company where it's something that I've never even been exposed to, there's pharmaceuticals on one side, it's banking on one side. I want to be able to be in the space to not just become a subject matter expert on this space, but also just understand how companies actually differ in those spaces, right?
Yeah.
And I think now, like if I went out and I decided to do something else, even on my own, because there is a breadth of understanding and knowledge, it becomes so much easier, because now you can say, no, I actually have like a sample size of experience that is so broad that approaching problems now, I can go in and say with authority that based on all of these things that I've just done, what I'm telling you is actually like correct and it's true,
Yeah.
or is right for you, right? So that I think is the big
Yeah.
difference. But I loved that ability to be dynamic, to be continuously changing, to be
Yeah.
continuously learning. Yeah,
Because there is an experience. So even if you're inexperienced in a particular
yeah,
situation,
yeah,
you have the experience of previous situations, right?
100%.
So one of the things that is always, I mean, I don't know how it is in your team, but
Mm.
it's this whole, oh, we need younger people in because they know the newer technologies, they're
Yeah,
like native to them, etc. And then the older people are a bit more like, oh, let me learn how to make a TikTok, where
yeah,
like no one who comes in from
yeah,
campus
yeah.
to the data duck needs to learn how to make a TikTok, you know?
No, no.
So
Yeah,
so
but like it's innate, right,
it's
within them.
innate, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So but I still think like the the older people in the room know 100 miles out that this is the risk, right? And this is how we firefight that risk, because
absolutely.
the youth can drive us everywhere, right? But
Hmm.
when it comes times of crisis, you need someone who
Yeah,
knows how to firefight. You need people who've been in problematic situations before and be like, I
yeah,
think we're getting there now.
yeah,
um and also people who just know, like, for example, if something is not loading fast on a site and
yeah,
it's an e-commerce site, I'm just like, check the CDN, right?
yeah.
But someone who's new, like a new designer, may
They wouldn't
not.
know this.
Yeah, they may go server side, they may go, like, it's just this, you just know
Yeah. But
because
that's the
you've
thing. You
had
you
the
know because of your experience, right? Like
yeah,
you've done this enough times to actually say, this is my immediate intuition,
yeah,
right? But you're absolutely right. You need a balance. I think you need
yeah,
both, because I think younger people will bring in a lot of that freshness, but also they're faster. They're faster at learning. They're faster at knowing, right? Whereas when you do become a little bit more experienced, you have the ability of experience there. But I
yeah.
think you tend to become a little bit more, like less amenable to change,
Agreed.
and more, you're kind of like, I know my place and I know what I'm good at, and
Yeah,
this is it. Whereas they will continuously challenge you, right? So I think
yeah,
that you need that dynamic there, because I think people need to feel like they're constantly on their feet,
yeah,
so that they can actually like also evolve, right? There needs to be a continuous evolution, I
yeah.
think.
And
Yeah,
I,
through and through.
you know, sometimes you're right. Like the experience is actually, sometimes it can work against people because they
Hmm.
build up like an ego that they are
Yeah.
experts in a particular space,
Hmm.
and then they're unable to look at it from the outside in anymore.
Yeah, yeah, and
Um,
I think it's really also it's very system. Like I personally feel it's industry driven. I don't think it's something that I see when I work with a company that is very tech savvy. Like if a company is very much has existed within tech or has operated within the tech space, this doesn't seem to be the case. But monolithic institutions, especially older institutions, when you're dealing with like a university or you're dealing with a bank, for example, that ability to silo and to gatekeep is so pivotal to who they are, that they feel like they need to continuously be this way in order to preserve power, right? And it's to their detriment. At the end of the day, like, you lose out because you've continuously just built up all of this collateral around you, and it's literally shielding you from all of this newness, right? So they don't want the newness, but they also want the newness,
They need the
and
newness, but
they
they're
need
scared
it.
of it. Yeah.
But that's the thing.
I had this very interesting experience recently where I was on a meeting, and the CTO of a big financial institution was also on the meeting, and my AI note taker was there. And
Yeah.
I have met with these people, but without the CTO on the call for like,
Yeah.
they've been clients for like 5 months or whatever. And AI note taker is always on the call. So I didn't really think anything of it. And I felt
Yeah.
like, oh, if they felt the AI note taker shouldn't be on the call, then
Right.
someone from their team would have been like, oh, Ritu, can you like, or just
Turn it
removed
off.
it because you can.
Yeah.
If so, the CTO then went to the CEO and founder of an enormous financial company and said that the data doc has planted listening devices into everyone's calendar, and because the notes went to everybody.
Everyone. Yeah.
I'm like, you're a CTO and you are not aware of an AI note taker and how
Note
that
taker.
works? Isn't that marvelously ridiculous?
Yeah.
Like, it's not
Yeah.
even the edge of AI.
No.
It is it is the 1 2 3 of how people use AI today, right?
Absolutely.
And as a
Absolutely.
CTO, I was just so shocked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I think that AI has actually accelerated this gap between
Yeah.
the risk takers and
Yeah.
the risk mitigators. And IT has now, in companies where tech used to drive innovation, sometimes now I feel the CTO function
Yeah.
actually is holding people back, and the
Yeah.
marketing, the product, the
Yeah.
design functions are the ones that are like, yo, we need these things. And
Absolutely.
like, I've really seen a change, a massive
It's
change.
it's actually like a big thing, right? Like, I think it is something that's forcing us to reconcile with a lot of what we do know. I also think, to your point, it is something that is showing you the forefront of what technology is today. And if you have built really, really key systems, even technically, that you feel, you're so proud of and you're so possessive of, right? When you're confronted with something that's this new, it almost seems like it's an immediate threat. And you're not going to try to understand it. You just are like saying to yourself, I don't want to go through this rework of actually like redoing all of this in order to accommodate this. But I think it also highlights the fact that, teams should have always been nimble. And I think that that's what it's lacking, right? Like, we stopped being fast. We stopped being efficient and iterative in our thought and in our processes and in our building. And
Yeah,
now we're kind of stuck. But CTOs as a whole always fear this, and I think that they always will go back to this idea of safety, especially when it comes to something like a financial services industry, because that's the easy out. It's just
yeah,
not safe, and we don't want the data out there, right?
yeah,
But the reality is, like, you cannot not have AI. Like, what would you do in a couple of years from now when the world has passed you and you're
yeah,
now trying to play catch up to
yeah,
all of this,
yeah.
right? Then it's like you've already lost,
It's
right?
it's a scary time for a lot of people,
It is.
who haven't been sort of, we've been straddling tech and design and all of that
Yeah.
for our whole careers, right?
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, they haven't. There's a lot
No.
of CMOs out there who just don't get tech at all, and they're scared of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that speaks more to the culture of organizations and society, where
Hmm.
you know it we're sort of, this is the result of my hard work.
Yeah.
When it is iterative, there is no result, like
Exactly. a
know.
hundred percent. A hundred
so
percent.
so like, the other day I went onto a website that we've created and I wanted to show this really cool thing. It had gone, right? And I
Yeah.
was like, where, what happened to my thing, right? They're like, we did it for a month and it's gone now. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. Oh.
what? You know? So I felt it that day. I was like, oh my God, my thing was so cool, right? And you only gave it the like 20 days or whatever in the world, but that's
Yeah.
great, right?
Yeah.
So I think like I don't know, like growing up, we've been sort of Pinteresting our achievements in our mind, right?
Yeah.
And being like, oh, that, like everything was like,
Yeah.
and now because things are moving so fast, it's just, I remember there was a time when I used to write the perfect email and I used to feel like, oh my God, that's such a good
You did
email.
this?
Who writes the perfect email now?
No. No. Who writes an email, Ritu? You know?
There were times
Yeah.
when we really labored over stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that just shows you, right? Like at the end of the day, that pinning accomplishments and saying that those are things that are there,
Yeah.
that is just for you, right? But also like building yourself up around that, I think it's kind of the challenge that all of this is now going to present to you, where it's just going to say to yourself, you did all these things, but guess what? It doesn't matter now because things are so drastically different that you need to start again from zero and accomplish all over again, right?
Yeah. So
No, I
yeah, it's
100%
everyday
feel you.
zero.
Every day zero, every day zero. I think one of the last questions I had for you today, Ritu, really is around, what your thoughts are in terms of where this space and how data is going to be pushing us forward. And really, what is the importance of continuously adopting data in our journeys, in our experiences, and what we feel it will do for us, especially when it comes to things like, now that AI is here, but also AI and beyond, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think, you know, people talk about oil and data, right? Like data's new oil and love. The only time I use data and oil as a sort of point of reference is
yeah,
the economies that had oil
yeah,
were very rich.
yeah,
The people who have data now
yeah,
are very rich.
are very rich.
Data is expensive. Oil was expensive. So if you can
Yeah.
afford to buy data, and
Mhm.
it's usually a outcome of scale. So I see a lot of consolidation happening, where there are fewer medium-sized companies that are able
Yeah.
to sort of compete with the big guys because the big
Mhm.
guys have the budget, the
Yeah.
capacity
Yeah.
to buy this data or get data. So, for example, if you spend above a certain amount, Meta and Google and all of these
Hmm.
people will give you data analysts to help you optimize your strategy with them,
Right.
be it data insights,
Yeah.
right, or marketing, right, and media buying. So and also content creation. So it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so for a smaller company that doesn't have a $500 million spend to get all these experts helping them every day with insights,
Hmm.
and just access to these insights, right? Like I think, I think data really is creating a lot of consolidation, and it's almost like an OPEC of data, right? There are
Right.
like five or six players in the market
Right.
who have most of the data of humanity,
Hmm.
right? And I mean, there is a point where so we have some APIs that we've got access to in the past for different projects, and the kind of data you get is quite insane. Like you can get data on things like what is the biggest fear of someone who goes diving and drinks wine and wears these brands, and
Right.
like so you can really get the persona down to like, oh, there are five individuals on the planet that meet these things, and you're like, what is
Right.
their greatest fear, right? And
Right.
once you know that,
Yeah.
you can tell them anything, right?
A hundred
So
percent.
so it's kind of concerning to me that the consolidation of data has become so massive,
Yeah.
and also that we're not talking about it, like there's no democratization of this, right?
No.
Like
No.
people are like, oh, we should own our own data. I'm like, well, yeah, but small and medium sized businesses should are are not going to be able to make it, right?
No.
um so
And
I
that I
think
feel like is very true. Yeah, that makes it a very anti-competitive environment to have literally
really is.
that many people like housing the majority of the data, and you have zero chance, right, coming in.
Zero, yeah,
Yeah,
zero.
yeah, I
So
feel you.
yeah.
No, this is great. I feel like that was one of the key things I think I've been noticing more and more. I also think people, to your point, people need to be very good about how they continuously feed these data machines, right? Like we need to be very mindful of the fact that like we continuously contribute to their success by allowing them to mine us for this data and
Yeah,
engaging with everything that they keep offering us, right?
yeah,
And I think that we complain a lot really well, but we never really do very much with
yeah,
our complaints, you know? So
yeah.
that is really key. This was so insightful, Ritu. I had such a good time talking to you. I think that, you, like I said, I feel like I come into these things, I learn a lot. So I feel like you've taught me a lot today and you give me a
You
lot to
taught me a
think
lot
about as
too.
well.
And I've
Yeah.
always been curious about Canada. Something,
So please
it's
come.
probably the one of the few countries that I have not, ever had
Me
any
too.
client from, any
Yeah.
work, like
Yeah.
nothing. So
You have a home here. So if you ever want to come visit, please feel free
thank
to come and,
you.
and, and say hi. Yeah, absolutely.